Nobody really tells women this, but what actually melts a man's heart has almost nothing to do with being pretty, funny, or the most entertaining person in the room. It isn't really about personality, it isn't about appearance, it isn't about how impressive your life looks from the outside. The women who genuinely move men, and I mean truly move them, the kind where he's lying there later that night still thinking about her without fully understanding why, do something entirely different. Something so small and unassuming that most women walk right past it every day without noticing the power sitting quietly in their hands. They use gestures, not big, theatrical, romantic movie gestures, but small, quiet, specific ones that land somewhere deep inside a man, somewhere he wasn't expecting to be touched. And once he feels it, he can't quite unfeel it. Here's the surprising part. Most women never use these, not because they're difficult or require some rare gift, but simply because nobody ever pointed out how much they actually matter. Nobody ever connected the dots between some small, effortless thing she did and the fact that he's been thinking about her for 3 days straight. Let's connect those dots now, walking through 7 of these gestures, why each one works on a man the way it does, and how to let them happen naturally so they land the way they're meant to. By the end, you'll understand something about men that a lot of women spend years trying to figure out and never quite land on. Here's something most women don't fully grasp about men, and this isn't a criticism since nobody really explains it properly, so of course most people miss it. Men feel deeply, more deeply than they typically show, more deeply than they usually get credit for. A man doesn't fall for a woman because she said something clever over dinner or because she looked stunning that night. He falls because of how she made him feel in one specific moment, and most of the time, that moment wasn't dramatic at all. It wasn't a long, meaningful conversation or some perfectly orchestrated scene. It was something tiny, something she probably didn't even think twice about, a certain look, a touch that lasted 2 seconds, a pause where nothing was said and somehow everything was communicated anyway. His brain registered all of it before a single conscious thought caught up. That isn't speculation, that's simply how humans are wired. We pick up on signals far faster than our conscious mind can process them. There's a name for it in psychology, the brain's built-in threat and reward detection system constantly running in the background, reading the room, reading the person in front of it, reading the energy in the air. So by the time a man consciously thinks there's something about her I can't quite explain, his nervous system already made that call 5 or 10 minutes earlier, based on something small, something quiet, something like the gestures we're about to go through. That's exactly why these small things carry so much weight. They bypass the thinking brain entirely and go straight to how he feels, and feeling is what actually changes everything. The first gesture is the slow smile. Not a big, excited grin, not the polished, camera-ready smile, not the pleasant social smile you'd give a cashier. A slow one, the kind that starts somewhere in the eyes before the mouth even moves. The kind that looks like it caught her a little off guard, like something he said or did genuinely got to her, and she couldn't help it. Here's why this lands so differently than anything she could say out loud. Men watch women's faces far more than most women realize. He's constantly reading, constantly checking. Is she actually enjoying this or just being polite? Is she genuinely happy to be here or partly somewhere else? Is what I'm saying actually landing, or is she just nodding along? A big wide smile doesn't tell him much because those are everywhere, easy to produce, easy to perform, and he's seen thousands of them. But a slow smile, the kind that takes a beat to arrive, the kind that seems unplanned, he believes that one. His brain registers it as real because genuine reactions look uncontrolled. And when a man catches that particular smile crossing a woman's face in response to something he said or did, something happens inside him that's difficult to put into words, but very easy to feel. It's warm, it pulls him in, it makes him want to be the reason she smiles that way again, makes him replay what caused it and want to cause it again. And here's the beautiful part. You genuinely cannot cannot fake this one effectively. Try to perform a slow smile and it just looks odd, like you're consciously making an expression. It only happens naturally when you're truly present with him, actually listening, actually in the moment rather than in your own head. When you're really there, when something he says genuinely affects you, that smile shows up on its own, no thought required. And when it does, he notices, even if he never says a word about it, even if he doesn't consciously register it in the moment. Somewhere in him, it landed. And later, alone, he'll find himself thinking about that smile and wondering why he can't stop. The second gesture is leaning in while he talks. Not dramatically, not in an obvious look how interested I am way, just a small, natural shift of your body forward while he's speaking. When he's mid-story, explaining something he cares about, sharing something personal, you lean in slightly. Your body moves closer without any fuss, almost like gravity pulling you toward what he's saying. This works because of what it silently communicates. When your body moves towards someone while they're talking, you're conveying something that's genuinely hard to fake and genuinely powerful to receive. You're saying, I'm interested. What you're saying matters enough to me that I want to be physically closer to it. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not half here. I'm actually here. Think about how rare that really is these days. Most conversations, even between people who genuinely like each other, involve someone who's only half present, nodding while already composing their next sentence. Eyes there, but attention drifted elsewhere 3 seconds ago. People are distracted in their heads, juggling 20 things even while sitting perfectly still. So when a woman leans in, when her body physically shifts toward him because she's genuinely drawn into what he's saying, his nervous system registers it instantly and clearly. She wants to be closer to me. She's actually listening, not performing listening, but genuinely doing it. That feeling of being truly heard, of having your words actually land somewhere and matter to another person, is one of the most powerful things one human can offer another. Most men don't get enough of that. Most spend a lot of life feeling like they're talking without really being heard. So when a woman offers that naturally, without making it into a big moment, something in him connects the feeling of being genuinely heard to her specifically, and he starts wanting more of it, more of her, not because of anything dramatic, just because she leaned in. The third gesture is using his name, simply working it into conversation naturally now and then, not constantly, not in a way that sounds rehearsed or salesy, just when it fits naturally into what she's saying. That actually makes a lot of sense, Jake. I get exactly what you mean, Jake. Wait, how did that end up going for you, Jake? Something that small, that simple. Here's the psychology behind why it's so quietly effective. A person's own name is the most personally significant sound they will ever hear. Something well documented in psychology. Hearing your own name triggers a different response in the brain than any other word. It's immediate, personal, and cuts straight through whatever else is happening to land directly on you as a specific individual. So when a woman uses a man's name in conversation, not overdone, just naturally and warmly, like it belongs exactly where it falls, he feels it, even if he couldn't explain what or why. He just senses that talking with her feels different from talking with other people. He feels like she's actually talking to him specifically, not just making conversation or filling silence, but engaging with him as a distinct, real individual, rather than just whoever happens to be sitting across from her. In a world where so many interactions feel generic and interchangeable, that feeling of being seen as a specific, real person is genuinely rare. It makes him feel like he matters to her. And a man who feels like he genuinely matters to a woman he's drawn to is already halfway gone, already thinking about her differently, probably without yet knowing exactly why. The fourth gesture is remembering something small he mentioned once, something said casually, in passing, probably without him thinking she was really paying attention. And then later, maybe that same evening, maybe the next time they talk, she brings it up. Not as a big deal, not, I wrote down everything you said, just a small, easy, natural reference. Wait, didn't you say your brother is the funny one in your family? Or how did that work thing end up going? Did it turn out the way you hoped? Something that shows his words actually stayed with her, that she wasn't simply waiting for her turn to speak, but was genuinely there, genuinely listening, and what he said actually went somewhere inside her and remained. This might honestly be the most underrated gesture on the whole list, because what it communicates isn't just a good memory. It tells him he mattered enough to be remembered, that what he said wasn't background noise, that he wasn't just another conversation blurring into all her others that day. She remembered him specifically, and for a man, that lands in a way that's hard to fully put into words. Here's something true about men that doesn't get discussed enough. Men share things carefully, even the ones who seem open and easygoing. When a man mentions something personal, even if it sounds offhand, even if he tosses it out like it's nothing, there's a quiet part of him watching to see where it lands. Does she care? Did she actually hear that? Does it matter to her at all? And when she remembers it later and mentions it, not to make a production of it, just naturally, he gets his answer. She heard me. She remembered me. I mattered enough for that. That answer does something that chemistry or physical attraction alone simply cannot do. It builds real trust, the kind that shifts how he thinks about her, not just as someone fun to be around, but as someone he genuinely wants to keep in his life. The fifth gesture is a light touch followed by pulling back naturally, a brief, gentle touch on his arm when something is funny, a quick touch on his hand while making a point. Natural, easy, like it just happened because the moment felt warm, and then she moves on. No lingering, no big deal made of it, no checking his face for a reaction. Just a light touch, and then it's gone. Here's exactly why that specific combination works the way it does. Touch is one of the most direct forms of human communication there is. It bypasses the analytical brain almost entirely and goes straight to the emotional one. A light touch from someone you're drawn to releases something in the nervous system, warmth, connection, a kind of aliveness that words alone can't quite produce. So the touch itself already carries weight. But the pulling back afterward is where the real pull comes from, because she touched him and simply moved on like it was easy, like it was the most natural thing in the world. She didn't linger or make it awkward. She didn't check his expression to gauge his reaction. She just touched him warmly and naturally and kept going. And now he's sitting there aware of his arm, aware of the exact spot she touched, aware that the warmth of it has faded and some part of him wants it back. He becomes more aware of her, more aware of the space between them, more aware that he'd like to close that space. And she created all of that with one small, easy, completely natural moment of touch. The sixth gesture is being genuinely comfortable with silence, not rushing to fill every quiet moment that comes up in conversation, letting a natural pause simply exist, sitting in it comfortably, not glancing around awkwardly, not jumping in just to break the quiet, just staying relaxed in the pause, as if she doesn't need anything in particular to be happening in order to feel fine. This one is genuinely rare. Most people, not just women, feel deeply uncomfortable with silence in social settings. Silence can feel like something has gone wrong, like she's boring him, like she urgently needs to say something clever to keep the whole interaction from falling apart. So she talks and talks, filling every gap with words just to keep the momentum going, because silence feels dangerous. But here's what actually happens when a woman is genuinely at ease with silence around a man. He exhales, maybe not literally, but internally he relaxes in a real way because she just removed all the pressure. She isn't performing, she isn't anxious, she isn't trying to manage the energy of the whole interaction. She's simply there with him, relaxed, seemingly fine with however the moment unfolds. And that is deeply attractive to a man, not in a surface way, but in a genuine, real way, because her comfort with silence tells him she doesn't need constant entertainment to feel okay, doesn't need noise to feel safe, that she's secure enough within herself to sit quietly with another person and be completely fine. And when a man senses that kind of calm coming from a woman, he relaxes too. He stops performing. He stops worrying about keeping the energy up. And in that quiet space, something real starts happening between them, an unspoken kind of connection, the kind words would actually interrupt. That is the kind of connection that stays with him long after the evening ends. The seventh gesture, and this is one most women wouldn't expect, is looking at him like she's proud of him, not in a condescending, good job little buddy way, just genuine quiet pride. When he handles something well, when he says something genuinely smart or funny or kind, when he does something that takes real effort or real character, she looks at him for just a moment, just in her eyes, with an expression that says, I see you, I see what you just did, and I think you're something. Nothing is spoken, nothing is turned into a big moment, just that look for a second, and then it passes. Here's why this one moves a man more deeply than almost anything else on this list. Underneath all the confidence, the independence, the I've got this energy most men carry around daily, there's a quiet part of them that simply wants to know a woman they care about genuinely sees them, not just what they do for her, not just the role they play, but who they actually are, what they're made of underneath, what kind of person they are when things get real. And when a woman looks at him with that quiet, unperformed expression of pride, she communicates all of that without saying a single word. She tells him, I notice you, I see what you're doing, I think you're good. A man who receives that from a woman he's drawn to is moved in the truest sense of the word, not the excited, butterflies kind of moved, but the kind that builds something lasting. It makes him feel, even without fully consciously understanding why, that this woman is different, that there's something here worth protecting, worth showing up for, worth becoming his best self around, because she already sees him that way, and he doesn't want to let that down. Here's what I really want you to take from all of this. These 7 gestures are not techniques. They are not calculated moves designed to produce a specific outcome in a man. Because if you do any of these things from a place of strategy, if you're performing them rather than genuinely feeling them, he will sense it. Men are far more perceptive than most people give them credit for. He will feel the gap between what you're showing and what's actually happening underneath. And the moment he feels that gap, the whole thing falls apart. So the only way any of this genuinely works, the only way these gestures carry real weight and land the way they're meant to, is when they come from actual presence, real interest, genuine attention, which means the real shift here isn't about memorizing 7 new behaviors to add to a routine. The real shift is choosing to actually show up fully when you're with him, to actually listen instead of managing how you're coming across, to actually be in the moment instead of running calculations in your head about how things are going. Once you make that shift, once you're simply fully present, these gestures happen entirely on their own. You lean in because you're genuinely interested. The slow smile appears because something he said really did land. You touch his arm because the moment feels warm and real and your body simply responds. You use his name because you're genuinely talking to him, not just talking. And that's when it lands. That's when something shifts in him. That's when he goes home that night thinking about you, unable to quite explain why, and not particularly wanting to stop. The difference between a woman who gets a man's attention and a woman who gets his heart is exactly what you've just learned. Attention is easy and everywhere. His heart is rarely reached through spectacle. It is not won by perfect words, carefully engineered conversations, or performances designed to impress. More often, it responds to something quieter, something so ordinary that people overlook it while searching for grand gestures. Real connection is usually built from moments that appear almost insignificant on their own, yet together create a feeling of safety, recognition, and genuine presence. It takes presence. It's not simply being physically near him, but being mentally and emotionally there as well. In a world where attention is constantly divided, where conversations compete with notifications, worries, and endless distractions, undivided attention has become surprisingly rare. When someone feels that your mind is elsewhere, they instinctively sense the distance, even if they cannot explain it. But when they feel your attention settle completely into the present moment, something inside them relaxes. They no longer feel they must compete for your awareness. They experience the quiet relief of knowing that for these few minutes they truly have your attention. It takes warmth. Not exaggerated enthusiasm or constant praise, but the kind of warmth that naturally softens a room. Warmth is expressed through tone, through patience, through curiosity, through the absence of unnecessary judgment. It tells another person, without needing to say the words, "You are safe to be yourself here." That feeling cannot be manufactured. It comes from genuine openness, from approaching another human being not as someone to evaluate or change, but as someone worth understanding. Then there are the small things, the things most people overlook because they seem too ordinary to matter. Yet human relationships are rarely transformed by extraordinary moments alone. They are shaped by hundreds of quiet interactions that gradually teach two people what it feels like to exist in one another's presence. A slow smile, not a smile offered automatically out of politeness, but one that arrives naturally because something about the moment genuinely reaches you. There is something profoundly reassuring about being smiled at by someone whose expression unfolds gradually, as though their face is responding to authentic emotion rather than social expectation. Such moments communicate acceptance without requiring explanation, leaning in slightly when he speaks, not dramatically, not as a technique, but as the unconscious language of interest. Small movements of attention often communicate more than carefully chosen sentences. They tell the other person, "What you are saying matters enough for me to move closer to it." The body often reveals curiosity long before words attempt to describe it. Saying his name. A person's name carries a unique psychological significance. It is one of the earliest sounds through which identity is recognized. Used naturally and sincerely, it can make conversation feel more personal because it acknowledges the individual rather than simply the interaction. It is not about repetition or performance. It is about recognition, remembering the small things he once mentioned, not because you kept score, but because you genuinely listened. Perhaps it was a favorite childhood memory, an upcoming challenge at work, a hobby he rarely discusses, or something that mattered to him in passing. When those details return naturally in later conversations, they quietly communicate something powerful. You were important enough for me to remember. Memory is one of the deepest forms of attention because it reveals what the heart considered worth carrying forward. A brief, appropriate touch, followed by giving space again. When welcome and appropriate within the relationship, a light touch can communicate reassurance or affection in ways language often cannot. Equally important is the absence of clinging. Respecting another person's space demonstrates that closeness and freedom can exist together. Genuine affection does not demand constant contact. It knows when to approach and when to allow the other person to remain comfortably themselves. Being genuinely comfortable with silence. Many people rush to fill every pause because silence makes them anxious. Yet some of the strongest connections are measured not by how much is said, but by how little needs to be said. Comfortable silence communicates trust. It says that neither person must perform to maintain the relationship. Presence itself becomes enough. Conversation no longer feels like work. It becomes something that arises naturally rather than something constantly manufactured. Looking at him with quiet appreciation, not idealizing him, not placing him on a pedestal, simply allowing your expression to reflect sincere respect when you admire something about his character, his effort, or the way he treats others. Human beings often recognize when they are being evaluated, but they also recognize when they are being genuinely appreciated. Appreciation does not ignore imperfections. It notices what is worthy while remaining grounded in reality. None of these moments require rehearsed techniques or carefully memorized scripts. In fact, they lose much of their meaning if they become mechanical performances. Human beings are remarkably sensitive to authenticity. They may not always articulate why something feels genuine or artificial, but they often sense the difference. The value of these quiet behaviors lies not in copying them one by one, but in allowing them to emerge naturally from sincere interest and mutual care. This is also why they should never be treated as guarantees of another person's affection. Relationships are shaped by many factors, including compatibility, timing, communication, emotional maturity, and the willingness of both people to invest in one another. No collection of behaviors can ensure that someone will love you or remain with you. What they can do is help create an atmosphere where genuine connection has room to grow, if it is going to grow at all. Ultimately, the deepest relationships are rarely built through flawless performances. They are built through repeated moments of authentic presence, thoughtful attention, and quiet consistency. They grow because two people gradually discover that they can relax into one another's company without pretending to be someone else. In the end, it is often these ordinary moments that become extraordinary in memory. Years later, people seldom remember every clever sentence or perfectly planned date. They remember how they felt when someone truly listened. They remember the smile that arrived without effort, the conversation that wandered comfortably into silence, the small details someone recalled months later, the gentle respect that never needed to announce itself. Those moments cannot be manufactured into lasting intimacy. But when they arise naturally from sincerity, they become the quiet language through which trust is built, affection deepens, and two people slowly come to recognize one another, not through grand performances, but through the simple, enduring act of being genuinely present.